Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hivemind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. The last couple days have been a little bit doom and gloom. I mean, not exactly doom and gloom. A lot of people have been sending me messages telling me that they're worried, they're scared, they don't understand what the future entails. And I've been doing a lot of videos going after the potential for left-wing authoritarianism expanding beyond our worst nightmares. But I don't want this channel to just focus on the negative. I also want to focus on the positive. There's an opposing factor, the opposite end of the coin, which a lot of people aren't putting focus on. The Democrats may have overstayed their welcome. They may have overreached, overplayed their hand, and generally in politics, in culture, in anything, in debate, the pendulum usually swings. Maybe we're at one end of the pendulum and it hasn't fully swung over just yet, but gravity will always play its role, and that swing is essentially inevitable. And that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about a couple concepts here. The first is, I think the Democrats are on the wrong side of most issues, and I think as scary as it is that they recently won the Georgia runoffs, the Democrats, don't forget, are still a fractured party, and their radical agenda may be doomed. And then I also want to talk about the Democrats and the ratcheting up of their rhetoric, the more intensified, hyper-partisan element that's taken over their party, the recent push for more censorship, less freedom of speech that I think is going to backfire. So let's put a positive spin on this whole thing. I'm going to show you guys a couple different stories. I want to make a couple different points. But before we get into any of it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. Now with that out of the way, let's roll the tape. Alright, so firstly, we just got to talk about how far the left is taking things. You know, in 2016, what lost them the election to Donald Trump? It was the rhetoric. It was the inflammatory, hyper-partisan, slanderous rhetoric, the isms, constantly going after their political opponents and trying to put labels on them and ascribe values to them or lack of values that weren't necessarily there, judging their characters on a surface level without evidence. And they continue to do that. You might have noticed ever since January 6th, the whole idea of white supremacy, fascism, Donald Trump's incitement to violence has come back. It had actually gone away for a little while, at least it had subdued, and all of a sudden, the rhetoric is getting as crazy as ever. Here are a couple headlines to put things into perspective. Nancy Pelosi condemns Trump supporters who chose, quote, whiteness over democracy. Joe Biden recently said this.
They should be treated as they're a bunch of thugs, insurrectionists, white supremacists, anti-Semites. 6N is not enough. I mean, come on. You know, these shirts they're wearing, these are a bunch of thugs. And they're terrorists, domestic terrorists.
Compared Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley to the minister of propaganda from the 1940s in Germany, Goebbels, and it just goes on and on and on and on. This rhetoric, I believe, will backfire. The pendulum's gonna swing, folks. You cannot get away with this kind of divisive, completely disingenuous rhetoric for too long. It's not a sustainable model. The only reason that it hasn't completely backfired in their face so far is because the media and big tech protects them. But we'll get more into censorship a little bit later. One thing I know for sure is that the Democrats are doing this because they're scared. The fact is, culture has been moving away from them slowly. Think about where people's heads were at back in 2008 compared to where they are now. There was a movement towards the Democrat Party and the left-wing side of politics. During the days of Jon Stewart and the 8 years of Obama, there was always talk about one notion that the Republican Party was over, it was dead, it might never come back. And that might have been true until Donald Trump and Brexit, which created a populist movement, a counterculture, a pushback to the corporate liberalism that had failed so many people across the Western world. The fact is, they're scared of Donald Trump. They know the reality. They don't think he's some fascistic dictator or despot tyrant. They don't actually think that. They merely want to project that because they're scared of losing power. They're scared of losing their grip on how people feel about politics and electing political leaders. The left doesn't want to win based on merit. They don't want to debate. They don't want open dialogue, and they don't want the media to cover both sides of the political aisle fairly. They want the bias. They want special treatment so they can continue to swindle. But it might not be working. Think about the media campaign, the onslaught that's gone after President Donald Trump in the recent news cycle, the impeachment, the double standard when it comes to left-wing riots as opposed to right-wing. They've once again used the Democrat political machine. But then why are we seeing stories like this? Why is it that we have a dynamic where nearly 90% of Republicans disavowed what happened on January 6th on the Capitol Hill, myself included, but with that exact notion, those people don't seem to be blaming President President Trump. President Trump's approval rating has gone up since what happened last week in Washington. Here's Trump's approval index over the last couple days of January. If the Democrats' narrative was correct, you'd expect it to start going down big time. Well, total disapproval is going down and total approval is going up. Doesn't exactly fit the Democrat machine narrative that they've been shoving down your throat. And of course, the next thing that I want to talk about is their agenda. We know that their agenda is radical. Based on polling during the election, people were opposed to abolishing the Electoral College. People were opposed to stacking the Supreme Court. People were opposed to expanding the Senate to add 2 more Democrat seats. And people were also opposed to ending the filibuster. That's why it was so scary to millions of people when the Democrats won the Senate majority in the Georgia runoffs. But there might be a final hope. You might have seen this story from a couple days ago. Manchin on proposed round of $2,000 checks. Absolutely not. Now, of course, people have different perspectives, and I'm not ruling for or against the $2,000 checks. Well, I'll give you guys my opinion really quick. I think that they should go through. I just think that they shouldn't go through on top of all of the other pork spending that hasn't been addressed yet. If you want to reduce the globalistic subsidizing spending on the shoulders of the American people, then go ahead and write those $2,000 checks. But if you're just adding an amendment on top of that, I agree with Manchin. Absolutely not. But the point is, Joe Manchin might actually be the most powerful lawmaker for the next 2 years. The Democrats, of course, have a +1 majority with Kamala Harris, who's going to be the president of the Senate as vice president, and she can break ties with that extra vote. But with many of these votes, she might not even be needed, and Joe Manchin might break with the Democrats himself on many of these issues. I think that Joe Manchin is going to vote against packing the Supreme Court. I think he's going to vote against anything that may even resemble defunding the police. I think he's going to vote against expanding the Senate, creating a nightmare scenario of perpetual Democrat reign. I think Joe Manchin is the last line of defense for the Constitution and the American way of separation of power. And this is the idea that the Democrats are fragmented. They voted for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker because they had no other choice. But the reality is, within the ranks, they didn't want to vote for Nancy Pelosi. They just had to stop Kevin McCarthy from getting speakership. Within the Senate now, you have Raphael Warnock and Ossoff. In the House, you have the Squad. More far left Democrats are joining the ranks. And headed into the midterms, how certain Democrats vote to control the far left Democrats, to obstruct them, to stop them, is going to determine whether or not they get reelected as incumbent candidates. That's just a fact. So I think there's going to be a whole lot of nothing. I don't think that the Democrats are going to be able to apply these sweeping changes and change the American landscape, political landscape, so easily. At least that's my hope. But that's enough of Joe Manchin. I want to get back onto, once again, the left and their double standard and what I believe is going to be their undoing, their self-sabotage as they continue to divide Americans. They've completely lost the plot, folks. What's going on right now with censorship is un-American, pure and simple, and most people disagree with it. Most average folk. Once people start realizing exactly what's going on here, the Democrats are going to lose more and more favor. They're just taking things too far. I mean, these are the type of headlines that we're seeing these days. Trump to be digitally removed from Home Alone 2 cameo scene after his Twitter ban. Lefties are literally pushing to digitally remove Donald Trump from Home Alone 2 because that level of snowflakery has been achieved. They're fundamentally anti-democratic, anti-constitutional, anti-American. Mark Dice has a great take here. I've been seeing a bunch of people saying this, and it's totally accurate. The Washington Post reports that Amazon to stop Parler, potentially forcing the conservative site to go offline. It's not a conservative site, it's a free speech site, but I guess that's a conservative value today. But the point is, illiberal Democrats on Twitter have been saying forever, if you don't like Twitter rules, if you don't like the rules, just build your own site, they said. These illiberals have said, just build your own website then. It's a private company. We did. And then they go after the host and try to shut it down. Let the free market decide, they say. Yet there is no free market and there's total monopolies. Once again, illiberals doing the bidding of mega corporations. There's just no way in my mind that this doesn't backfire. The narrative right now in their short-term plan or their short-term play based on the current news cycle is that Trump supporters are vile and racist and violent. But we know that's not the case, and we know that there's been a track record of 4 years to disprove that exact claim. Where on the other side, actively as the media is still focused on January 6th, a black bloc mob of Antifa terrorists are assaulting groups of Trump supporters in San Diego. Can't show you guys the video, but it's happening. In New York, an Antifa mob with shields are roaming on the streets and taking over New York blocks. This is going to be an inescapable reality for the next couple years. Antifa's not going anywhere. The far left militants aren't going anywhere. And so it's going to backfire. The pendulum's going to swing. The liberal lunacy, the liberal violence, the Democrat lunacy, the Democrat violence will continue to play out. And hopefully more and more people are paying attention. More and more people will understand what's going on, of course, if the tech companies allow them to see it. And I think the narrative's going to shift. I think at the end of the day, we're on the right side. We've been on the right side. We will continue to condemn political violence. We will continue to push this populist movement in a positive manner. And as long as we do that and keep our heads straight, look to the future, and try to win over people with good ideas, win over people through their hearts, as corny as that sounds, I think it's going to work out because our side is on the right side and our approach is sustainable. But that's what I got for you. If you guys enjoyed it, please make sure to leave a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video as much as possible. We are still shadow banned by the YouTube algorithm, hidden from non-subscribed viewers. Now I got to get back to work, folks. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.